Local and state liberal Democrats across the country continue to encourage violent protests and refusing federal government assistance to bring both law and order back to their streets. With skewed data of COVID-19 infection rates and the summer winding down for our children, the socialist tasks with schooling our young ones have one goal in mind: continue the generational indoctrination within our nation's public, college, and university educational systems. This morning, I exposed the new liberal doctrine outlined in motion to deny the continuation of a Trump administration in November and put our country on a collision course for civil war. This ahead and more on the Closet Conservative podcast. I'm your host, Eric Wright. Let's get started. From New York to Portland, Chicago to Atlanta, rioters continue to loot and lead a life of crime against our nation. As local and state liberal legislators and mayors attempt to appease the unpatriotic, businesses and public places are left in ruin. The city of Portland continues to burn. The streets of Chicago resemble Baghdad. And all the while, these Democrats stand defiant on President Trump's action to send in federal law enforcement to bring civility and order back to communities trembling in fear. Many local and state public schools and college and university systems have delayed and altered their upcoming semesters. Learning looks to be changed or outright ignored as Democrats across the nation continue to push fear among their citizens. But folks, among the fear and violence imposed by liberal legislators in action, something more sinister is percolating against our people. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm referring to the outright generational indoctrination of our nation's youth. This is nothing new. Since the 1960s, public and private institutions of education, including our nation's public schools, have brainwashed our children, ultimately teaching a top-down tier method of learning directed from the government, which stifles creativity and allows our nation's youth to exit like shells of sheep, blinded by reality of life and sacrifice. Entitlement is the educational mantra in America today. And while evident for over 60 years, indoctrination has progressively worsened as our nation's educational system has been invaded by socialist Democrats. Today, many teachers have a captive audience of malleable young minds of children. And the outcome? Make our kiddos submissive and obedient. Indoctrination is a comprehensive effort of passively disseminating a particular viewpoint. For liberal educators, it is to join the socialist ranks, defy conservative authority, and challenge history and religion. Beginning in kindergarten and lasting throughout their educational career, our children hear the same thing repeated in a million different ways until they finally take it as unquestionable truth. The curriculum should help guide the teacher to create lessons and use materials that will train them to think and function independently. Instead, most public school curricula, either adopting the Common Core standard or imitating them, do the complete opposite. According to a Federalist article in October 2018, instead of reading great poetry and literature, English teachers ask their students to read more journalistic nonfiction and develop a more research rigor understanding. Instead of reading for meaning and writing clearly, students read for bias and learn to write fluff. And the result is the reality of their mind and life is lost. And utter fiction and fabrication become truth. Now, in the throes of a national pandemic, teachers and educational elites want to restrict in-person learning, kicking kiddos out of the classroom into a method of online learning platforms. For liberals, this logic is all about safety. But in reality, this allows our children to be spoon-fed continued socialist thought without the interference or rebuttal from the few who dare challenge their anti-conservative curricula and against the establishment. Folks, across our country, it isn't the older generations that are partnering in protests and riots. No. It is our nation's youth, people. Spewing regurgitated thought, defying the fiber of our nation's being and founding, and skewing the reality of our democracy. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Don't believe me? Try this. Last week, Wake County Public School Systems in the state of North Carolina launched a website with Black Lives Matter resources for teachers to use in the classroom and parents to use at home. The website, titled Racial Equity Resources for Wake County Public School Systems Educators and Staff, is filled with Marxist Black Lives Matter propaganda and promotes such ideologies as critical race theory, intersectionality, and identity politics. One of its primary purposes is to promote equity, folks. That is not to be confused with equality. According to ReformationCharlotte.org, the site also contains references to the unjust killings of several black people, including Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. The website pushes teaching children about race from a child's perspective, and then links to and encourages teachers to learn from a CNN propaganda video about racism by CNN homosexual anchor Anderson Cooper. It then shows a video that Millbrook High School students publicized in Wake County, North Carolina, that continues to advance the notion of white privilege, white supremacy, and systemic racial injustices. But worst of all, most of the resources linked to on the website link to tolerance.org, which heavily promotes transgenderism, homosexuality, and other sexual aberrations. Folks, the indoctrination invasion of our nation's children is dangerous. Their creativity is lost. But they are learning liberal theory and democratic distortions. Our nation's history is being deleted for more politically motivated pandering from the left. Ladies and gentlemen, note that not all educators are liberals. That is not what I am saying. I know many teachers in my community that I care about that share my same value. They have said no to the killer and anti-conservative Kool-Aid, defied socialist school staff, and instilled a sense of pride, a sense of patriotism, a sense of thankfulness to be an American and to live in a free society. Folks, we will overcome this virus. We will move forward from the flames of democratic dissent. However, we must, as a nation, be mindful of what our children encounter every day, especially from leaders within our community, those who should be responsible for leading their young minds to a path of personal accountability and understanding the notion that success is not guaranteed, but only attainable by hard work and dedication. Many of our nation's children have been taught a lie, but Republican-led rehabilitation is possible. Join me today to ensure the self-awareness, sensibility, and the survival of our nation's children continues. This is Eric Wright, and this has been the Closet Conservative Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. Please remember to give a 5-star review and share our podcast with your friends. The Closet Conservative Podcast is a production of the Liberty Loft. Copyright The Liberty Loft, 2020. You can find more shows and information on our website, www.thelibertyloft.com, or any of our social media channels.